Dogs make the best companions for humans. This podcast aims to help make humans better companions for their dogs. Welcome to the Baru Podcast, a modern lifestyle podcast for dogs and their people. I'm your host, Charlotte Bain. I've been caring for other people's dogs for more than 15 years. And while I've learned a lot in my career, I definitely don't know it all. So I've collected an ever-evolving roster of amazing dog people, and I learn new things from them all the time. Hi, you guys. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of the Baru Podcast. In today's chat, I'm joined by Karoline Edmunds of Dog Mom Mentality. Karoline shares her journey with me on how she helped her reactive dog Layla conquer some of her fears and gain confidence, and how through the process of working with Layla, Karoline was really able to heal her own mental health struggles, strengthen her own communication skills, and really find confidence within. She's also built a community through social media to share her empowering messages with other dog guardians who might be feeling the emotional challenges in their own journey. We chat about how to be more mindful, how journaling really helped her, and how lessons from dog ownership can really carry into your everyday life. So let's just jump into the chat. Well, I wanted to say thank you for reaching out because I was looking over all of your stuff and I just love how open and honest that you are, about your struggles with anxiety, I think
right.
Struggles with depression and how that kind of relates to your relationship that you have with your dog. So I don't know if you want to just jump in and introduce yourself and kind of tell me about your journey. I know you really wanted to share kind of your journey with Layla. Is that her name?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, with Layla.
Yeah. So I can jump right on in, do an introduction. So I'm Karoline. I am 25 and live in Lexington, Kentucky with my husband.
Oh yeah, you just got married. Congratulations.
Yes, thank you. Yep, we just got married in September. And then our dog Layla, she's 3. She just turned 3 a couple weeks ago. So she is still in some of I don't want to say puppy phase, but I don't want to call her an old adult dog. There's still a lot of things that she's learning.
Yeah.
But from age 6 or 7 months to probably 2 months ish, or 2 years, she really had a lot of reactivity issues that we walked through.
Those are teenage years. So.
Right. Yeah. And so that kind of time period from the middle of 2020 until basically the end of 2021, early 2022, we were really working through a lot of reactivity, building up our relationship, and a lot of confidence issues through her. At the same time, I started to learn a lot about myself through all of these struggles that we were going through and all the challenges that we were overcoming and ways that I can improve myself for dog ownership, but how those lessons also carried on to my outside life, just my human life. A really good example of this is communication. So I found I was really nagging with my communication with her and not being very, I don't want to say black or white, but just, I wasn't really making it clear as to what was, either what I wanted, if it was obedience or, just telling her yes and no, what's right and wrong, what she can and can't do kind of thing.
Right.
And, I started to see how I needed to clear up my communication with her. And that carried over into a lot of my everyday life things, whether it be communication with my partner or at work or with my family, being able to set really clear boundaries to communicate what I needed or what I wanted. And that has been one of the biggest lessons I've gained from dog ownership, and dealing with her through reactivity. But it's definitely led me down this path of personal development, I like to say.
Yeah.
So we've overcome a lot of stuff, her and I together, but it's really funny because this time 2 years ago, we honestly did not like each other. Like me and
Interesting.
Layla.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
You were kind of at your limit. I mean, that does
Right.
happen. You were feeling really frustrated and probably just
Right.
didn't know which way to turn and
Right.
what had
Yeah.
you gotten yourself into, essentially,
Yes.
right?
Yes. That is exactly right. So, um, my husband is actually the person who wanted a dog, and
Okay, I
then
was going
he
to ask.
started,
Yeah.
yeah, so he started traveling for work. And so that's when the responsibilities really came down on me. And up until that point, we just had no relationship at all.
Hmm.
I like to refer to that time as us being like stepsisters that were just kind of thrown into the same house. So then it was, this really long journey of, building our trust and relationship with each other. And then we kind of had to build that up and get some things in order before we could overcome some of the various obstacles that she was having with her reactivity, things that she was scared of, things that she, had to overcome herself, but I had to be able to guide her. So,
Right.
it was so important for me to be in a good headspace, me to be able to properly communicate with her, like not letting my ego get in the way of what I was asking her to do or not to do, kind
Right.
of thing. So,
Right, which is a key lesson because I think oftentimes, we, especially when we're kind of thrown into like, especially for like first dog ownership, we're kind of thrown, or companionship, we're kind of thrown
right.
into these situations where everyone's kind of telling us all these different things that we should be doing or shouldn't be doing with the dog, with any dog, versus like really taking into account the dog that we have right in front of us. And
Right.
what is this dog, taking that moment? Like, what does this dog need from me? Like, how can I show up for this dog? How can this dog show up for me? We have to be willing to do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Can you share some of the ways that she was being reactive, or some of the struggles that you had there, and what that looked like for people that just might be kind of grasping for straws right now, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I feel like one of like my favorite things, I guess I should say, about, social media and
Yeah.
talking about this is just giving people hope of like,
Yeah.
this is where we were, this is where we're at now. And so the biggest thing was, well, two really big things. So she was scared of a lot of stuff,
Yeah.
and she would flee. So that was her reactivity outside of the house, is that
What kind of dog was she? She's an
she
Aussie?
is, yep. So she's an Aussie mix.
Okay.
So she was we got her right before the pandemic. And so she wasn't technically a pandemic puppy.
Okay.
Where we got her after the pandemic, we got her in February of 2020, but she had a lot of the
Well, that's
same.
right at the beginning of
Right.
the pandemic.
Right.
Yeah.
It was like we got her, and then it was about a month later when
Yeah.
COVID really started happening,
Right.
and like the world shutting down in quarantine.
Was she a brand new puppy? Was she 8 weeks?
Yes,
Yeah.
she was. She was like 10 weeks.
Okay.
Yeah. So she was a brand new puppy. So she has a lot of like the socialization, kind of the lack of socialization that a lot of those pandemic puppies went through.
Yeah.
And so we were living with my mom. She lived in a really quiet neighborhood. She was a really good dog.
Yeah.
And then we moved to the house that we live in now. It's more in the city, lots more traffic and people. And that was whenever a lot of her reactivity started gradually showing up, into the point that we couldn't even walk off of our street because she was so scared. As soon as we would even go to turn off of our street, she would run in the opposite direction. And she was in a harness. It was almost like she was hyperventilating.
She had panic attacks. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that was honestly kind of one of the first times that I ever really connected with her, because, at this point it was like we were living in the same house. I would take her on walks and I would take cute pictures of her. But like, my husband was doing a lot of the like bigger responsibilities, and we weren't really doing a whole lot of training at this point either.
Okay.
Yep. And so going on those walks and seeing her having those like panic attack, almost like things where she was like feeling like she's hyperventilating and trying to run away and like gasping for air. That was one of the first times that I really connected with her, because I thought to myself, oh my gosh, like I know exactly what she's feeling. I've had an
Yes.
anxiety attack before. I've had a panic attack before.
Mhm.
And it was like the first time I had ever really given her some like sympathy
Right.
because I I didn't have any kind of connection with her
Right.
up until that point. And so I remember thinking like I've always like been a aware of mental health, an
Sure.
advocate for it, um, seeing other people in my life struggle with mental health. And I've always thought, I've had these dark moments. I don't want other people to go through them.
Right.
At that point, it was, oh my gosh, I've had these dark moments and I don't want this poor puppy to go through that.
Yes. Right.
And it was like the first time that I had ever really connected with her. And so at that time, I didn't know what to do. I didn't even know what the term reactivity was,
Mhm.
let alone any kind of like training for it. Confidence building for dogs was like out of my vocabulary.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's out of a lot of people's vocabulary. They don't
Right.
necessarily identify that kind of behavior as reactivity or as a dog being nervous, scared,
Right.
or, because you have been through that in your own life, you were able to identify that in her and connect with her on
Right.
an emotional level, right? Other than
Right.
this, just this animal, like, what am I supposed to do with this animal? Oh, wait, she's
Exactly.
breathing, feeling. She's a breathing, feeling, sentient being
Yes.
so just like
Yes.
us. Yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, definitely related to her on that. But I was overwhelmed and I didn't know what to
Yeah.
do. So we just kind of isolated ourselves to our street and our
Hmm.
backyard.
Hmm.
Thankfully we had a backyard. But yeah, so at that time I felt really confined because I wasn't really able to do much with her. She was this high energy
Yeah.
breed
Sure.
and she was scared to walk off of our street. So we were, confined to doing 4 laps around our circle because that made a mile. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Right.
And so but the real kicker was right at about a year old, we had an incident in our house with a landlord, and I
Mm.
had to put her in the crate very quickly.
Ah,
After this incident, she started to have really bad barrier aggression in her crate, which
I see.
basically means she wasn't really having separation anxiety in
Yeah.
terms of she was in the crate and barking. It was more so whenever we would put her in her crate and we would go to close the door, that's when the aggression would show.
Because just for people listening, so because she associated that moment with whatever happened. Can you discuss what happened with the landlord, or it was just like a stranger coming into the house?
No,
Or,
the landlord was coming in. I didn't know. We did not have very good feelings towards each other. It made me very anxious.
so
I
you
went
shoved
and
her in the
put
crate, yeah, like
right to
quickly
go.
with all sorts of anxiety.
Yes,
Yeah,
right.
got it.
And so, I will never know 100% if
Sure,
that's like the true reason
sure.
that all of the barrier aggression came about. But like, it was very much. It seemed like it correlated.
Yeah, yeah.
And so that moment was very rough
Hmm.
because then we started to see our dog acting aggressive towards us,
Okay.
me and my husband, because she was scared that she was getting put in the crate again. And
Hmm.
um, it kind of came out of nowhere being
Interesting.
in air quotes,
Yeah.
because at the time it was like, oh my gosh, this came out of nowhere. Hindsight's now 2020, and I can look back and say maybe this is the reason why
Hmm. Hmm.
all of this started to happen. But at that time, it was giving me so much anxiety. One, not being able to give her a proper outlet for her energy. And so she was, having some of this pent up energy let out inside
Sure.
of the house, but then also the barrier aggression and seeing that barking and lunging and growling towards us.
And that was only when she was in the crate, or
Yes, it
okay,
was only whenever we were going to close the crate door. But
got it.
I don't know what kind of dogs you have or if you've ever had an Aussie, but those herding breeds, they pick up on patterns really, really
They
well.
do. Yeah, and I was reading her. You said her DNA was she's an Aussie, and then she's also Shepherd.
Mm-hmm.
It's like she's also like German Shepherd in there too. So you
Right.
mix that with
And
a whole.
cattle dog. Yeah.
Yeah, she's a high energy working dog. They're very
Right.
sensitive and very smart. Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
So what ended up happening is over time she would pick up on the patterns of
yeah.
mom takes me out for my midday walk and then I go to the crate, or mom takes me out for my evening walk and
Yeah.
then I go to the crate. And so some of that aggression would start to show whenever I would take the leash off after we go for a walk,
Yeah.
or whenever I would, start to do some of like the nighttime routine things before we would put her up. And so it was just like very tense all the time, I felt like.
Yeah.
And I was working from home, so I was with her almost 24/7. Some of the other things that I was having anxiety about in my life at that time, I felt like I could shut the door and put it out for a bit. But with her, it was impossible because we lived together.
Yeah.
So it was causing me so much anxiety at the
Sure.
time. I'm glad to say, we've overcome a lot of those struggles, and I can dive deeper into that if you would like, but
Sure.
definitely overwhelming frustration and like just all-time high anxiety for me during those moments.
Because you felt hopeless and frustrated.
Yes.
And then also, to be perfectly honest, sometimes it takes up a lot of energy and a lot of time. And so I think some people get resentful, like, why what am I doing? Like, why am I doing this? I have to work. I have to do all these other things. I have to do all do these human everyday things. Like, why am I stuck with this mess?
Right. Right.
Which is
totally.
I think everyone who's been frustrated with raising a puppy or having a dog that shows reactivity can get really frustrated with that, and it's a cycle.
A cycle is a very good word.
Yeah, it's a cycle because you feel like, I think, until you get on the right track again, and most people try numerous trainers and all sorts of different things, trying to figure out what works for them. It feels like you're grasping at straws, I'm assuming. You go in circles, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
totally. Yeah. And over time I started to realize, how my behavior and mood affects her and how hers affect me. And then that kind of like feedback loop.
Mm-hmm. We can dive into that. I want to dive a little bit more into what those moments of frustration like taught you about yourself. Because
That's a great question. So at that time, it was right around whenever I actually got on my first medication with anxiety, which was a pretty big moment for me.
Yeah.
But at the time, my mental health was still pretty private.
Mm-hmm.
I was an advocate for mental health. I talked about it with other people, but I didn't really talk about my struggles necessarily.
Sure.
And honestly, opening it up to like how my dog affected me emotionally was really big in terms of like opening up this like whole all of my mental health struggles kind of thing.
Right.
It was kind of like I was taking baby steps into diving into some of the bigger things for me, like my overall depression or my overall anxiety and the different things that triggered me. And I think it was just because talking about it from a dog owner perspective was really relatable and easy. Like people understood it.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of like the stepping stones for me to talk about the bigger things that go beyond dog ownership. And I will openly talk about, so many things now, but at that time period, I was still very closed off from talking about my own mental health struggles. But deeper than like a surface level, I would say, I'm frustrated or I'm anxious, but it was kind of like that surface level thing, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Like we can all feel frustration. We all can feel anxiety. We can feel sad or disappointed, but like what is driving that really? And
right.
And if it becomes a constant, that's another thing.
Right. So, yeah. Like that breaking patterns.
Yeah.
And so once I I started training Layla. And we got to a point that I felt like things were more manageable.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really good for my anxiety.
Sure, I bet.
That was really good for my own anxiety. And then I kind of felt like something was missing, and that was more so the relationship aspect between her and I. So about March, I think, of 2021. So we had been kind of training, making things more manageable for about 3 months. So about March, I started really getting into like playing with her and building up like her confidence and doing more fun things and more outings.
Yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm. But it was at that point that we started to do more experimentation that I really learned a lot about myself. I think probably the biggest thing that I probably learned was I let my ego drive a lot of the times. Yeah. And a good example of this is we would go out to, either for a walk or like to Home Depot or training or something, to the park, whatever. And if I saw an opportunity that could be a training opportunity, I would put us in it no matter what. If I thought that I could handle it, then I was putting Layla in it. And it was almost to like prove that we could do something, not because we necessarily needed to or wanted to. It was just so that I could like prove that we've worked hard and that I'm a good dog owner and that my dog can handle this. But, and you know, sometimes like most of the time it worked out. Most of the time, like it was fine. Like she handled herself, I handled myself. But like realistically, did she like need to do that?
Through that.
Right. Probably not. Like it probably did like give her some stress. And even though she didn't show it in the moment, it probably showed up some other time. And you know, it was even things as simple as if I was walking and she had just used the bathroom. And so I needed to throw away her poop bag. And there were 2 trash cans. There's one that was, you know, over to the right, there's no dogs around, but then there's one over to the left where there's, you know, a few dogs. I would purposefully go to the one on the left with dogs at it, just so that I could prove that she could be neutral around other dogs and that she wouldn't react and that she wouldn't get excited and that she could handle herself. And, you know, she did it. She proved herself, but like it probably added on a lot more stress than what
you didn't need to do that.
Right.
You could have just put it in the garbage.
Right. So exactly. And so that is just a prime example of how there was so many instances that I was letting my ego drive the ship just to prove that we could do something, or like prove to myself that like I'm a good dog owner and like I have put in the work, and like I saw her as this extension of me for a very long period of time. So it was like her success was my success, her failures were my failures. And I let that control a lot of what we did during those first few months of like getting out into the world and experimenting, which when I look back on it, it's really hard to think about because that was the time that I was really working on her, building her confidence, but I was putting her in probably some unnecessary stressful situations.
That of course counterproductive to working on your confidence.
Right.
It's so great that you can talk freely about this. I really love this and I really appreciate it, because I do see with a lot of people, it does become, I can think back to when my dog was, he had a bad stranger danger for the first 5 years of our life. So he loved every single dog. He wasn't scared of skateboards, wasn't scared of anything like that. But stranger danger, not interested in strangers whatsoever.
Right.
And before I knew anything about dog, oh my God, there's so many times I just set him up for failure. You know, thank God he, you know, never did anything that could have potentially been harmful to himself or the other person. But it was just like so many times I didn't know and I just set him up for failure. And I just feel horrible about that because of my ego, because I was like, oh, this guy's judging me. Like, oh, like I don't like, why do you have a barking dog? Like, go do something with your dog. Like, what's wrong with you? Right. So it's like a reflection. We somehow think it's a reflection on us in some form or another.
Totally. Yeah.
Not taking the dog into consideration. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Learning like so much about, you know, they have feelings too, how, you know, they have triggers that build up over time and they can only handle so much stress just like humans can. And kind of like relating that like psychology, I know it's like not the exact same, but like kind of relating some of that has really helped me like understand her and understand myself a lot better.
Can I ask, how did that, I mean, you can, or you don't have to share this with us, but like, how did this reflect on your relationship you had with your fiance, your boyfriend or your fiance at the time? Because, you know, this is something that he really wanted, you didn't want, and then it became your responsibility. What kind of a role did that play in your growth or your journey all together as a family, right?
Right. No, this is an excellent question that I really haven't like dived deep into in many other like areas, whether it be on posts or my podcast or whatever. So I guess to kind of back up a little bit, it's not that I didn't want a dog. It was more so that I was indifferent about it, and that, you know, it was just going to be like he took over the main responsibility and I was there to take cute pictures and
right. Like, snuggle, like your Instagram, like everybody's Instagram dream dog.
Right. Yeah. And so whenever he started going to travel for work and I was with her for a few days at a time, you know, at first it was like, okay, whatever, like we'll figure it out. But then the crate issues started happening. And that's when my anxiety got really, really high. And so I think the first piece that I want to say is that, he had the conversation with me of, well, I hate seeing you this anxious. Either we figure it out, we like get to training, we, deal with it basically, like we overcome it, or we rehome the dog. Right. And that was kind of whenever my first ego kind of kicked in, and I was like, well, I can't rehome this dog.
Right.
And looking back on it now, it was totally like, I don't want to be the person that rehomes a dog.
Would it make you feel like a failure in some form or other?
Yeah. Right. And so that was the first like tough moment that we had because of her. Later on was during that like experimentation phase, whenever we were starting to build our confidence and trying to overcome some obstacles. One particular time was she was in the bathtub and she really did not like baths. And so I was like, okay, well, I'm going to feed her in the bathtub so that she can have a positive association.
Right.
I didn't have like water running or anything. I just like had her food in there. Smart. And she was getting so frustrated and just barking, and she wouldn't get in the tub, like even though there was food in there. And she's a very food motivated dog. Uh-huh. And, he was like, why is she barking? And I'm like, I want her to get in the tub so that she builds this positive association with the bathtub. And he was like, well, it's obviously like not really doing anything. Like maybe you need to take a few steps back because she's just barking. Like nothing's happening. This is counterproductive. Like this is just like making it frustrating and difficult for her. And it's driving me insane. Like, cause she's barking.
Yeah.
And, at the time, like I was so set on like doing, going, just trying to do everything that I can and push as much as I can into one day so that she could like get over this as quick as possible. So I could get over this as quick as possible. And that was one of the times that like, I don't want to be like, I became obsessed with it, but like to some other people, they could be like, she's like obsessed with like getting over this challenge as quick as possible.
Right. Like it's become like a thing. And so now she's trying to like put it as a accomplishment.
Right. Just mark it off my to-do list, like get it over with as soon as possible. But it's with another living being and I can't control how fast she can get over an obstacle. Right. And so that was probably the other really difficult conversations that we were having, because we were having, me and my husband, he was my boyfriend or fiance at the time. But we were having, because he was like, what you're doing, I see that you're trying to go, but she's like, obviously not at that speed. Like, take it down a notch. And I was like, I can't take it down a notch. Like, I want her to get over it. I want us to get over it. Like,
so he was kind of the voice of reason. Like from the outside, he was just saying like, this is
right. And
reel it in.
Yes. But like at the time I was just like, can't, I have to get over it. I have to, it was almost that proving thing again. Like I wanted to prove that we could get over it. I wanted to do something very specific so I could post it on Instagram and show everyone that we like did. So it was kind of like that outside perspective of like, I see that you're trying to do good and that you're trying to work on things together for her, but this is not the right way to do it.
Yeah.
But at the time I was so set on it. It was very, very, very hard for me to like take a step back and like look at it.
Right. Yeah. I can imagine it was challenging, and I'm sure in some ways probably brought you guys closer because you were able to kind of like you're able to work through these challenges together, right? So.
Yeah, and I always say that like having a difficult dog was probably the best preparation for me to have kids.
Yeah.
Sure. Not that like anything is coming in the future, but at one time she was driving my emotions just all over, up and down, left and right, like literally just like spiraling at some points. And there was a point in time that I was like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to have kids. Like if I can like emotionally, mentally take it. Yes. Because she's like making my emotions go all over the place and I can't manage them. And so, being able to kind of like get through that and get to the point like where I am now with my like emotional well-being, mental health, like it's all because of her, because like she put me in situations that made me work for it. And so it's like now I think if we ever did have kids, I would be able to like handle it better from like a mental, emotional perspective.
Right. Especially because you've learned that it's not always what you think it's going to be. There's a lot of figuring it out along the way.
Right.
So, yeah.
Or just like the whole thing of learning that they take it at a different pace than I do. That's a huge thing for
That's
me.
key.
Yeah, because I grew up an only child. And so
Yeah.
that kind of like teamwork aspect of like having empathy for your teammate and learning and like knowing that they go at like a different pace than you, that was a really big learning curve for me.
That's great. That's so great. I want to talk about some of the ways that you were able to help Layla gain confidence.
Yeah. So,
and how it helped you maybe gain some confidence as well, or helped you,
yeah. Well, I think the thing that I got out of all of those sessions that we, worked on her confidence building specifically is that it just brought me so much joy. And it was a win. It was a win for me.
Yeah.
And, that brings up good feelings and good emotions and good hormones. And
it brought you joy because you could see the joy in her, or you saw the confidence in her, or
both.
you saw how she enjoyed the learning and the play
Right.
and all of the things.
Right. Yeah. All of it. And then also just that we did it as a team. She wouldn't have gotten over that hump without me. And like, it was nice to see like our relationship building because we overcame that together. So some of my favorite things are, so she's very noise sensitive. And so I do something called box feeding. I don't know if you've ever heard of it.
I have not heard of it. I would love to know. I actually have a kiddo staying with me right now who is incredibly noise sensitive. So
yes,
I'd be interested to know, what is box feeding?
Yeah, so she's very food motivated, which helps. But it's basically like you teach them to target their nose on an object in a box. Like you can use a spoon or I think
like target training.
Yeah, like a washer or whatever. And so you put it in the box. They put their head down in the box to touch the target, and you drop food. And as long as they keep their head in the box and their nose on the target, they get food. So you teach that over time, and then you eventually start adding in distractions. So it's really good with noise because you could eventually add in a door closing or people knocking and, go all the way up to playing fireworks over the loudspeaker or whatever.
So it's a good desensitization game.
Yes, super good for desensitization. So that's probably one of the things that has really helped, especially with noise sensitivity. Climbing on anything ever possible. That's always really fun. I took some tires from a neighbor and just, would set the tires up in various ways and just have her climb over them to, get her balance and put her paws up on stuff. And that's always really fun. And then definitely through play. So I used play I built up her play drive with some different tug toys specifically. And then I used it to desensitize her to skateboards, which was one of her biggest triggers. And so it's
a tough one.
Right. So she used to even be so scared of skateboards that she like couldn't even just like see them. Like even if they were just stationary, she got very scared of them.
So she wouldn't want to chase them. She would want to run the opposite direction or hide.
Yes. She would want to flee and hide.
Yeah.
And so, it took very like baby steps to, get her to play around a skateboard with it just being stationary in the same room. And then, we would be playing and I would kind of roll it a little bit, and then it would be we would be playing, and then I would like, hit it with my foot and make it flip and make a noise. And like, I eventually got to the point that, neither my husband and I can skate, but I would tell him, like roll on it by us while we're playing. And that whole like build up really, really helped her to be able to pass a skateboard without, fleeing anymore.
Right.
Yeah. And so there's a skate park actually by our house, And it was a really, really, really huge accomplishment to be able to walk past that skate park
I bet.
without her reacting and trying to run in the opposite direction.
That's so great. So you've been working really hard to create positive associations with all of the things, all of her triggers, essentially, right?
Oh yeah,
To help
for sure.
desensitize that.
Yeah. Yeah. The whole, I really like desensitization too, because you can do it inside your house. Like all of these things that I'm saying, like we just did in our living room, even with the skateboards. And so I really love desensitization for that reason. And it's just been such a big help with her being able to overcome things. Makes life so much easier and more joyful.
That's so great. And so you have actually taken upon yourself to create a really amazing journal. I want you to share with me a little bit more about and everybody's listening, a little bit more about the journal that you've created for pet parents who might be struggling with reactive dogs. Is this something that came out of your own process of journaling, which is something that I've always wanted to get into, but I just don't have the structure to do it. I'll do like 2 pages and then like don't touch it for a month.
Right.
But yeah, so I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So it's one of the things that I did on my own. And I saw that, it really helped me with overcoming some of my emotional stuff that I was having because of Layla. Whether it be from a vet visit and me being super anxious about a vet visit, or just
because she would, can you tell, like she would be terrified of the vet?
Oh my gosh, vet visits are
try to bite, or just
vet visits can just be very stressful in general.
Yes, they're stressful for everybody because everybody's anxious about what's going on.
Right, right. Yeah.
Okay.
But no, she does. She doesn't really like to be handled.
Sure.
Yeah. So it was just stressful in that situation.
Yeah.
Which, even I feel like almost, I'm not going to say every dog, but, I would say the majority of dogs probably get a little anxious at the vet, and most parents, pet parents do.
Yeah. I think that 99% of the dogs probably get, even if you've paired it with positive associations, but it's a tense place to be if you're a dog or a dog owner, you know, or a dog companion. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So I made, the journal just kind of like to help with managing your emotions, processing those emotions, having like a proper outlet. A lot of the times I would, realize that I was holding in a lot of these emotions and then would let them out on my fiance or my mom or my friend, or like, whatever would happen. Or I would get depressed because I was just like having all of these things inside of me, but not letting them out in a proper way. And I wasn't making room. I was focusing a lot on the negatives and not making very much room to be even open to receiving the positive type stuff. So I made this journal. It's actually for any pet parent. You can use it. It's not specifically for reactive dog owners, but it would be perfect for reactive dog owners. I mean, that's definitely how I developed it. But, I think it could be useful for new dog owners, senior dogs. A lot of emotions can come with senior dogs.
Yeah, I was going to say, someone just recommended my dog is almost 15, and someone just recommended that I just kind of start journaling just about writing down the changes that I saw in him, and also just things, my feelings around that and all the things.
Right.
So,
yes.
That's great.
Yeah. So it's called Growing and Healing. I have a copy of it here.
I love the title too.
Yeah, healing spelled like, a dog healing. And it has 4 different sections in it. So it has an intention setting section, which is really like just, what do you want to be as a pet parent? Are you like, what are you like looking to get out of using the journal? Whether it be managing your emotions, or you want to be more patient, or like you want to focus on the good just as much as the bad, and, whatever kind of that like bigger picture is. For you, the owner, it's really focused on the owner and like the owner's perspective of what their dog is, making them feel. The next section is a goal setting section. So there's 6 months worth of goal setting pages with, enough room for you and your dog's reflection on that, and to go over happies and crappies, which is my way of saying, the good and the bad.
Yeah.
And then the beef of the journal is the uh, actual like journal prompts, the journal entries. And so they're divided up into 10 common emotions that dog owners face, which are, let me get to them because I don't want to miss one. Let me get to the table of contents, but it's frustrated, anxious, guilty, alone,
Yeah.
unmotivated, vulnerable, joyful, motivated, appreciative, and brave. And so, you would flip to the emotion that you're feeling, and then from there would be a prompt kind of describing how other people may feel that emotion, whether it be you're anxious about a vet visit, or you're anxious because you're going to start a new training class, and maybe your dog's reactive, or maybe it's the first time your puppy is meeting a small kid for the first time, like whatever it may be. Your dog doesn't have to be reactive for you to become anxious about something. And then the prompts from there are really related to the emotion that you're feeling. So for anxious, it might be like, what is this bringing up? Like what past experiences does this bring up for you? What kind of pattern might this be? Really kind of diving more so into the emotion behind it. And then, for the more positive emotions like joyful and motivated and brave, it's really reflecting and reminiscing on the good moments that you've had, whether it be you accomplished a big trigger, or you were really proud of yourself because you advocated for your dog in a certain situation, or your senior dog did something that they haven't done in over a year, and you're just so excited to see like their energy. So there's a place for that in there as well. And then the last part is a wins tracker. So just to kind of write down all the big and small wins that you may have. So that way, if you're ever feeling down or unmotivated, you can flip to the back and be like, well, look at all these things like we have accomplished. Like, even though I'm like so laser focused on the one bad thing that just happened, I can go back to this wins tracker and see like, these are all the really cool and great things that like we've done together as a team.
That is so great, especially for first-time dog owners, because it kind of sets them up for success a little bit, to let them know that it's okay to be going through this whole journey and these process of different feelings.
Right. Yes. And I wish somebody would have told me, because I feel like it's almost a taboo topic to talk about how about how your dog can make you feel frustrated, and how your dog can bring about some of these negative emotions. But, because everything is Instagrammable and happy-go-lucky and all the good things. And whenever you get into the comparison game, especially, you really start to have a lot of these big feelings, and you just don't realize that other people go through them as well. So you feel really alone or overwhelmed. And just if I feel like knowing at least that other people go through these experiences, and being able to process it and manage it a little bit better, one, it's going to help your dog, because you're able to help them better, because you're not reactive yourself. But then, so many of these lessons trickle over into your everyday life. And so I feel like it's this bigger picture of, empathy and emotional intelligence and like mental health as a whole, that it may start with this small community of dog owners, but every dog owner is something else as well. They're a worker, they're a mom, they're a daughter, they're a sister, whatever. And it
You're
just
a living, breathing human,
right? It just
going through the day to day,
right?
stuff.
And it just trickles out into something so much bigger, I think.
So where do we find this?
Yeah, so you can find it on my website, dogmommentality.com, and I'd love to give your listeners a discount if
would love that.
Yeah, if they would like that. So I would just set it up as the Baru 10 for 10% off.
Got it. So Karoline, what I think is the biggest, and you've kind of touched on that throughout, but the biggest gift that this journey has given you?
Yeah. So like I said, I just feel like so many of these lessons have trickled over into my everyday life. And not only do I have a stronger relationship with her, I have a stronger relationship with especially my best friend and my husband. And I don't
Oh,
think some of those skills would have been there if it weren't for her kind of being like the catalyst and like the initial invitation into like this longer healing journey.
some would say our dogs are here as our soul guides. I'd like to believe in that for
Yes.
sure. For sure. My dog has definitely taught me so many things and has changed my life for the better in so many ways.
Oh, yes. I love that soul guide. I've never heard of that, but that's good.
Some people have, like, there's one particular dog that they've had, even people who've had dogs for many years, who have taught them so much about themselves or so much about how to be in the world, or just had held that special place, in their heart. So,
Right. And I mean, it could have been so easy 3 years ago or 2 years ago to dismiss what she was doing and just, be, keep her inside and like not try to experience some of these things with her or rehome her. Like it could have been so easy to let that happen.
right.
But because of this, even though it was really difficult at times, it's made me a better person. Given us a better, more enjoyable life.
Thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Baru Podcast. If you're interested in purchasing the Growing and Healing Journal, I've put links in the show notes, or you can check out dogmommentality.com, and don't forget to use the code TheBaru10 for 10% off your purchase. You can also follow Karoline on Instagram at dogmommentality, and don't forget to check out her podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. As always, if you enjoyed this episode of the Baru Podcast, please don't forget to rate us and follow us. And if you have a story of canine companionship that you want to share with me, or even just a question for me, you can email me at charlotte@thebaru.com. All right, you guys, let's chat next week.